Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Hangar Talk podcast. This week on the show, we sit down with airshow pilot and current first officer for WestJet, Stefan Trischuk, to discuss all things aviation related, including how he became Carol Pilon's Third Strike Wingwalker pilot, his time being featured on Airshow Discovery Canada's Airshow documentary, and much, much more. So, everybody, we hope you guys enjoyed the episode this week, and we'll talk to you on the back end. Hangar Talk.
Hi there. Hi, Braden. How are you?
Good. How are you, man?
I'm great. I'm just actually in where am I? London, Ontario, and getting ready to fly to Calgary today.
Oh, nice. Have a good flight, man.
Cool.
So,
Thank you.
everybody, this is Stefan Trischuk. He is a pilot for Third Strike Wing Walking, and is also a first officer for WestJet. Is
That's
that
great.
correct?
That's correct. Yes.
And is also a first officer for WestJet. So, let's start with you, Stefan. How did you get into aviation?
Well, I actually started in a very elementary way. I started with hang gliding. So, and that's basically like that wing where it's basically the shape of a triangle, and you hang underneath it, kind of in the prone position, and then you can run off of a mountain or you can be towed. And yeah, that's how I first got off the ground. So, but it's really cool. I really enjoy it, and I did it a couple years ago, still, but that's how I originally started into aviation.
Nice. That's awesome. So the way I started is my parents took me to the Miramar Air Show out in San Diego back in 2009.
All right,
I don't know if you heard of MCS
I,
Miramar.
I definitely have. Yeah,
Nice.
that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. And then oh, Yellow Thunder's in here. Hi, Stefan. How you guys doing? I've never seen you guys fly. I want to see you guys fly one of these days.
Yeah,
I mean a lot of
that's Dave and Drew Watson, Yellow Thunder, and they also live in Alberta as well, Alberta, Canada.
nice. And then my grandpa was a huge help in my aviation. He would take me to Gillespie Field Airport out in El Cajon, California, and we would watch the airplanes land and take off.
Okay,
So he was also a big help. He served in the army too,
your grandfather did.
or my grandpa.
Your grandpa.
Yeah.
Okay.
So next question is, do you remember your first air show? If so, what was it like?
My very first air show would have been Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. I was probably 10 years old, and there was a couple airplanes that flew, and then a huge storm came through, and the rest of the air show got canceled.
Aw,
And
darn.
I still have this vivid memory of like my, parents holding my hand. Or actually, I was probably younger. I was probably like 6. They were holding my hand. We were walking against this huge wind and all this rain and this huge storm. This guy lost his hat, and I remember seeing that his hat basically can't come and tumble and land in front of me. And he looked back and he just kept on walking. Uh, he wasn't interested. He wanted to get to his vehicle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still remember that. Back super young.
That's awesome. So, do you have or actually, before I say that, I was at Miramar this year in 2023, and it was like all rainy and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they still had the show. Blue Angels still did the high show.
Okay, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So, I actually loved the air show documentary you were in. That was really, really cool. I loved seeing you perform your first air show at Boundary Bay and
Yeah.
all the mentors watching you. So I really admire that. That was actually really, really cool.
So I'm glad that you enjoyed that, and I'm glad that people were able to kind of connect to that a little bit because it really followed me from an early stage, and it kind of showed how someone who doesn't come from an aviation background can go from no experience at all in air shows to doing air shows. I think a lot of the people in the show, well, for sure, a lot of the people in the show they've been doing it for years, so. But it actually showed people on the show who were maybe interested in doing this, maybe a little bit of a roadmap on how it's possible if you have no experience to actually get into doing this.
That's amazing. And does Super Dave Matheson still fly?
Super Dave, boy, he's fallen off the map. Uh,
Oh,
Nobody talks about him anymore. Um, he is out of the air show industry. and he's out of the
Oh,
country. So last
really?
he was out of the country flying a float plane. Yeah.
That,
So
that's all.
yeah, he is MIA. Missing in action. Don't know where he is.
Oh, really?
Really?
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Like, for good, he stopped flying air shows?
In Canada and the US for sure. I can pretty much guarantee that he probably won't be doing air shows in this continent again.
Oh, wow.
So yeah.
So, so how did you become Carol Pilon's Third Strike Wing Walker pilot?
To make a long story short, I I flew that yellow biplane for a while, and then I started an entirely different airshow performance where I was doing World War I dogfighting.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, so we did that actually at some of the biggest shows in the US and Air Force bases. And it was going great. We're getting really good audience engagement. People were really enjoying it. But then COVID happened. And I did not fly an air show for 2 years because I actually couldn't travel between the US and Canada during COVID without doing that like 2 week, what do they call it, like isolation period. And I just, with work, there was never a 2 week um, time span where I could do that. So I didn't fly any air shows for 2 years, and I was actually planning to get out of doing air shows just because of that. I mean, the airplane had sat for 2 years, so I sold the plane, and at that point, Carol called me up because she needed a pilot, and she knew that I'd flown similar airplanes with the World War I, dogfight, and she needed a pilot to fly the wing walker. So she asked me, hey, would I want to do this on a part-time basis? So I gave it some thought, and I thought to myself, well, it might actually be a good way to stay in the airshow industry. I mean, maybe I don't have to quit the airshow industry, just because I sold my airplane. It's also really tough to find paths with this very specific qualifications for doing air shows. So it was a really good thing for both Carol and myself. It just really worked well. She needed someone, and I had the qualifications. So we're like, yeah, let's try this. And I've been really, really enjoying it. It's wonderful working with the team, working with Carol, working with Joe. Joe's the other wing walker, and he also flies as well, and he drives the truck. And it's so fun to be part of a team. Even when I flew the yellow airplane, I was kind of on my own a little bit. I would go to air shows on my own, and I was kind of a one-man team sort of thing. It's way nicer being part of a team of, say, 3 people. We can hang out together, crack jokes together, work together. It's really nice. It's really fun.
That's awesome. And do you guys do any shows like beyond the East Coast, like the West Coast, or is it only the East Coast in Canada?
Oh no, absolutely. We do shows all around North America. So we only did one Canadian show this year, and that was Grand Prairie, Alberta. But we have done, oh boy, I mean, we actually, since I've been with the team, we haven't done any California shows. So we haven't gone right to the West Coast, but we've done pretty much every other part of North America. We've been as far up as Gatineau, Quebec, in Canada, and then we've been,
Oh, okay. Nice.
yeah, all over the place.
So, over the okay. That's cool. So a lot of that's awesome actually. Scratch that. That's awesome. So, do you guys who mainly is actually when you're flying with two wing walkers, how does the weight of the aircraft hold up to the weight if there's only one walker on board?
That's actually a really good question. Yes, so a lot of times I will take off with one person in the front cockpit and another person on one of the wings, which means I have a bunch of weight on one of the wings. And it's actually not as bad as you would think. I have to hold a little bit of stick pressure, but it's maybe only a pound or two of stick pressure just to compensate for the weight of the person on the wing. And same thing when I'm flying at full speed. It's just a little bit of stick pressure, but it's not as much as you would think. It was actually at the last air show, I was taking off with a wing walker on the left side, and I actually had a crosswind from the left side. So it was actually helping me out. I didn't have to work as hard to hold that wing down, just so that the crosswind wouldn't pick it up. And I told the wind walkers this, as I'm taxiing back, I might actually need someone to walk over to the other wing, because that's going to be the upwind wing, just to hold that wing down, just to make sure that the wind can't lift it. The wind wasn't quite to that point. I didn't need them to go out there, but it's kind of interesting how I can kind of get people to move around on the airplane to kind of help me out a little bit.
Wow, that's very interesting. I didn't know that it was actually light. So the Stearman, is it a light, is it heavy control, light control? Like, is it a operating difficult to operate or no?
The Stearman, I would say it's very heavy on the controls. When I pull up to do a loop, I sometimes don't just do it with one hand. I'll sometimes take my other second hand and just I don't need both hands to do it, but sometimes I will use both hands as I'm, say, pulling up into a loop or coming down the backside. I'll be using one hand and then helping it with the other hand, just to give myself a little bit of extra leverage.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it is heavy on the controls, but yeah, the more I fly the airplane, the more I'm able to kind of finesse it a little bit more, rather than just kind of manhandling it around. I can kind of finesse it, and I notice less and less how heavy it is on the controls as I get used to it and fly it more and more.
Okay, interesting. So, I'm actually taking flying lessons right now out at Chino Airport in Chino,
What are
California.
you flying?
Uh, well, I used to fly the 150 2022, but their aircraft unfortunately got hit with a golf cart, unfortunately.
I feel like this is probably a much more interesting story.
Yeah, I,
What happened there?
well, I don't know. Somebody just told me they rammed a golf cart as I was doing simulator training. And
Yeah,
then, yeah, so now I fly the Cherokees. I have about 10 hours right now,
cool.
and I'm trying to get my private pilot's license, but as you know, money is tight because this I don't know, money's tight right now with aviation.
You
So,
know what? I totally agree. A lot of times people ask me how I got into aviation, but kind of what they're actually asking me is how I afforded to pay for the plane and pay for the training to get into aviation. Because honestly, that's the hardest part. I mean, for me, the flight training came quite easy, and a lot of it came quite easy, but the money was the most important part. How do you afford to get the flight training and everything to get into aviation? Because it is so expensive. So maybe we could talk about that a little bit. That might be helpful, and I could tell you how I did it, and then maybe you or your viewers would be able to maybe decide or maybe get some ideas on how they could do it. So what I did, so when I was getting into aviation, I didn't have any plans of working commercially, of doing this as a job, which I do now. I just wanted to fly air shows. So what I really needed, I didn't need to build like multi-engine IFR hours. I just needed to get a commercial license and have enough money to pay for aerobatic flight instruction and also be able to buy an airplane. Even if I couldn't buy it outright, at least be able to qualify for a loan to buy an aerobatic airplane. So I realized quite early that I wouldn't be able to work in aviation, say as a flight instructor or a low-time, commercial pilot, and make enough money to do that. At least it would take years, and I wanted to get into air shows as soon as possible. So I got a job outside of aviation. I actually got into mining. So
really?
yes, I became an underground miner, working 3,200 feet underground, operating equipment like loaders, and I operated the big boring machine that tunnels through the ground. And in my early 20s, I was able to make a decent, amount of money, and that's how I paid for my flight training. If I would have worked, say, as a flight instructor or done some other sort of like lower paying job, it would have taken me so many years. I couldn't have been on the or on the TV show and had an airplane and afforded the training if I wouldn't have taken kind of that route. And that was the plan though. Just find a job that pays really good, at a young age, even though if I have to move away from home, if I have to work up north or work away from home, or work in a mine, I thought about the oil fields. That would have been the other option too. But I went mining instead of oil fields. And I did that for 4.5 years. And at the same time, so I was able to get the airplane, do the training, but I was also able to like buy a house, which and a couple of rental properties and stuff too, and kind of, get set up kind of financially at a young age. Then did the air show stuff, but then surprisingly, I had these licenses and ratings, and it was always a very small amount of upgrading. I just had to get like a multi IFR to then go work in aviation. So because I was already kind of set up and had a house and had done all that training, I could then take a lower wage. It was a big pay reduction to then start working as a pilot. But I was able to kind of do it. Thankfully, I don't have kids. I do want kids in the future. But at the time, I didn't have kids. It would have been very tough. But it's kind of like tried to plan it out in that way. So I hope that's maybe gives your viewers some ideas on how to do it. If there's some sort of job that you can do, it doesn't have to be. It's just a temporary thing, but just to be able to afford the training, because it is so expensive. And when you're doing the training, money just disappears so quickly. Man, you can spend hundreds of dollars a day on this training. You know, it's actually really hard to stomach, especially when you're younger and you're like, oh man, stuff I could be doing with this money right now. Except it feels like you're flushing it down the toilet because it goes so quickly. But one thing to remember, if but I've heard captains say this: aviation training is actually a good return on investment. You'll spend, I'm thinking Canadian dollars, but in US dollars, it's probably what, 50, 60,000 to get a commercial, a private, and then a commercial, and then a multi IFR, so that you can be employable for a company. It seems like a ton of money, but it really is a good investment. You're going to make a low wage for a few years, but then after that, it does continue to rise, and you can make a really good living. It can be very lucrative, especially in the U.S., being an airline pilot or whatever kind of pilot you want to be.
Oh, okay, got it. Very interesting too. Thank you for that. Oh yeah, and they talked about you working on the mine in the airshow documentary. So, and I saw the quote you said, "I work below ground so I can fly above ground." That was cool.
Yeah, so yeah, exactly. I hope that kind of connects how or exactly what I was doing. So yeah.
Got it. Thank you very much for that. And then, do you have a favorite maneuver you like to do?
Well, I guess it depends what airplane I'm flying. With the pits, I really liked the tail slide. So that's where I would go straight up and I would roll as I'm going up. And then the airplane would eventually kind of run out of energy and it would just kind of stay in one spot and it would just be kind of rotating under the torque of the propeller. And then it would slide backwards through its smoke. I like that one with that airplane. I would say with the World War One show that I was doing, I really liked the head-on passes where we had propane machine guns on the airplanes, so it'd make like the boom and the flash. So we'd be flying at each other with the guns blaring, like shooting, and then we would basically turn and miss each other. That was a fun maneuver.
Oh, that's amazing.
It was a lot of fun, yeah. And then with the Stearman, I like the barrel roll. It's really
Oh,
fun to
wow.
with Carol on the top wing. It's really cool. And one of the things that I have to be careful with the wing walkers that I always maintain positive G. So whether I'm doing a loop and I go inverted, or I'm doing a barrel roll, or I do a regular roll, when I'm upside down, I'm actually just giving it a little bit of back pressure on the stick, so that I'm still keeping the wing walkers pushed into the airplane. They're still experiencing positive G, even if I'm inverted. So
Okay.
yeah, yeah. So it's
Because the
actually
Stearman doesn't have an inverted oil system, the engine will quit.
you're exactly right. Yes, you're exactly right. But it also makes it easier for the wing walkers as well, to hang on to the airplane, uh, to always be feeling positive, G.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Very important too. Gotcha.
But yeah,
What
multiple.
air?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay.
What aircraft does he fly? Says Wake SWXVY Aviation.
Okay. So in the air show, I fly a Boeing Stearman, a 1942 Boeing Stearman with a 450 horse engine. For work, what I'll be flying later today is a Boeing, also a Boeing, but a Boeing
Yes, sir.
800. But for work, I fly the 700 series, the 800 series, and the Max 8.
Oh,
And
nice.
we could even have a whole Max 8 conversation too.
Yeah.
Do that. But yeah, that's what I fly.
Awesome. Thanks for the question, my man. So what are the different hand signals that you guys use while you're flying? You and Carol and the wing walkers. Like, I would imagine this is okay. You can go. This
Yes.
is, I, what? I, I don't know.
Sure. No, that's actually a really great question. So you're right. So we use pretty simple. We use thumbs up, thumbs down. This actually means hold your position. If I give them this, it means hold. Um, yeah. Um, so and nods as well. So usually what I'll do, one very important thing when I'm flying with Carol is I have to have the airplane slowed down to about 70 miles an hour before she does a transfer, before she moves from the wing to the cockpit, cockpit to the top, to the top rack. 70 miles an hour is where we do that transfer, but I also have to have the throttle at idle because if she moves through the prop blast, I will blow her off the airplane.
Oh,
You don't want
yeah. You do not want that.
It's like a ton of air moving backwards from that 450 horse engine. So what I do is I set the airplane up 70 knots, I pull the power all the way off, and I put it into a glide. I then usually give her a nod, and she knows that, yep, I've got the power back, and she can move. Then she moves out. When she gets locked in her position, she gives me a thumbs up, I nod, and then I do like whatever maneuver I'm going to do. Now, before that maneuver, I will usually check, I will look at her, and I'll give her a thumbs up, and I'm basically asking, are you good to go for this maneuver? And she will be like, yep, I am. And we do it, it's very subtle, but we make eye contact, and we do this before every single maneuver. Because
Gotcha.
what actually happened earlier this year was she's on this wooden, it's called a javelin, and it sits in the wing wires, and it basically keeps the wing wires from vibrating. But that is all that she's riding out there. She's riding this wooden dowling, and the wooden dowling broke.
Oh, what?
Yeah, so what happened is I went and I did a loop, and when I pulled G, it snapped, and she was still hanging on, but she was now riding this broken piece of like wooden dowling, and she looked at me, and she was like just kind of like shaking her head, and I was like, okay, something's obviously wrong, so I'm not going to do the hammerhead, which is the next maneuver. So I didn't know what the problem was because I couldn't tell that it was broken because she's hanging on to it, so I couldn't see the javelin. But yeah, she wanted to land. I'm like, I guess we're landing. I don't know what's going on, but I guess we're landing because we can't hear each other. It is so loud with the engine. There's so much air resistance. We can't hear. So we're just doing it with these hand signals. So I went and I landed. And then as soon as she gets off it, I can see, yeah, it's broken.
Oh,
But
wow.
that just goes as an example. One of the reasons why we're always checking in with each other between each maneuver.
Awesome. That's very important to do, especially with a wing walker that you can't hear because of air and the
Yeah.
engine's very loud.
Yes.
And where exactly is the strut on the aircraft? Here, hold on.
Sure.
Where exactly is it on the airplane? The,
The strut.
the
So, okay. So you have what is considered the eye strut. So on your airplane there, kind of outboard, so you've got that strut that holds the wings apart.
yeah.
What you actually have that isn't shown here is you have wing wires. You have wing wires that are attached to the top of that strut that go to the bottom of the fuselage, and then you you have wing wires that go from the top wing down to that bottom strut. So you essentially have wires that create an X that go to the top of the strut and to the bottom of the strut here. And then you have the piece of wooden doweling that is basically sitting across those wires. That's what Carol is on.
Oh, wow.
Smoke systems, right? Especially, it's like a huge smoke screen. So it's funny enough, back in the 1920s, when they had, when alcohol was illegal and you had these, all these gangsters running alcohol away from the cops, they installed smoke systems on their vehicles. And so they would create smoke screens so that like the police couldn't chase them. And that's why to this day, it's illegal to put a smoke system in your car.
Oh, yeah.
Because it is so effective. It creates so much smoke. I don't know why they haven't, I don't know if they've done it on a James Bond movie or something like that, but it's such an insane amount of smoke. Yeah, you can't follow that. You'll smoke out the whole road.
Yeah.
But yeah. The only thing, though, this is getting off topic, though, is you can't have a car with a catalytic converter.
Oh, really?
That you put a smoke onto, because the smoke it'll instantly plug up the catalytic converter.
Oh.
So you could
wow.
do it either with a car that has straight exhaust pipes, or just one that, an older car that never came with a catalytic converter. As long as you put that smoke injector really close to the engine exhaust manifold where it's hot, that's where you'd want to do it. Anyway,
Really?
I don't want to give anyone any bad ideas here. I'm just saying, hypothetically, if they wanted to just do it for scientific purposes only, you could install one on your vehicle.
Okay. Back to the aircraft I'm holding. Does this
Sure.
look like a Stearman to you?
It's similar to a Stearman, except the struts in the center. You can kind of see those struts that come off the fuselage. They're at a 45-degree angle.
Oh, okay.
That's definitely not like a Stearman. And also the wings have square tips, so that's also definitely not a Stearman. Our airplane has rounded tips. So if I was to guess, I would say that looks kind of like a Pitts Model 12, or kind of like a Steen Skybolt.
I've heard of those.
Although the Steen Skybolts have different struts. An airplane that has very similar struts to this, I think, would be an Acro Sport. I think an Acro Sport would have similar. So that looks like an Acro Sport with a radial engine, because normally Acro Sports don't have a radial; they've got a horizontally opposed engine. Yeah.
Really? I didn't know
although the tail looks like a Stearman. If you look at the tail, like the vertical stabilizer and the rudder, that's very Stearman. So I think I think for the toy, I think they made it a hybrid of a few different biplanes.
Yeah. It was made by what's the Skybusters, Matchbox Skybusters. Made this. I mean, I'd say they did a good job.
Sure. Okay, that sounds good. I guess, what other questions do you think would be helpful to your viewers, or maybe is there any questions about the wing walking that maybe someone would be embarrassed to ask, or something that would be just something that people would be dying to know about how we do it?
I don't know. Does anybody else have questions? So
here's a popular question that I get asked. Do we have safety tethers? And the question is yes. So the wing walkers, they wear a harness that's very similar to a climbing harness, like a rock climbing harness. And then we have it's just a steel cable wrapped in rubber, and they're tied on the whole time. Yeah.
Okay.
The only time that they're not actually tied on is for the takeoff and landing. Surprisingly, they actually unclip for the takeoff and landing. And the reason being, it would be better if something happened during the takeoff and landing. It would be better that they were unclipped than if they were clipped on, especially when they're on the wing. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Or especially, say, if we're doing an over water show, I'm flying over water, flying low to the ground, doing aerobatics. We would not want to land in that water, say, if we had an engine failure, with the wing walkers clipped in.
Oh, wow.
Right? Because if we were to have an issue and crash into the water, So basically, yeah. So if it looks like we are going to land in the water,
Yeah.
they will unclip. But other than that, if they're moving around the airplane, they are clipped in.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Never knew that. And what do you know who Marcus Payne is?
I certainly do. I do know who Mark Payne
Whatever
is.
happened to him? Well, I actually already know what happened, but he.
Sure. For your viewers, I will say what happened to Marcus. So Marcus was Carol Pilon's wing-walking pilot during the Discovery Channel air show TV show, and Marcus was killed in an air show, probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I was actually at that air show when it happened.
Oh,
So
wow.
Marcus was not flying Carol's airplane; he was flying his own Stearman. When the accident happened, it was in Madras, Oregon, and he was doing a stunt where he would start his maneuver and he would do a loop from takeoff. What that basically means is Marcus would take off and he would stay low to the ground, and he would fly in ground effect, really low to the ground, and then he would loop the airplane from that point. Here's the problem: a steerman struggles to have enough energy to loop without first diving. So if you watch, say, when most people will do steerman aerobatics, they will first dive, get lots of speed, and then loop. Because here's the thing about energy when you're doing a loop. If you have tons of energy, basically when I mean energy, I mean tons of speed, you dive, you have lots of speed, you come into that loop, you can actually finish that loop at a higher altitude than where you started, right? You have the energy to finish it higher up. But then what people in air shows usually do is they come in with lots of speed. They could finish the loop up here, but they then intentionally fly the backside of the loop back down to the ground. If they make a small miscalculation in their speed, in the density, altitude, and whatever, they can just pull a little bit harder and pull up higher. But here's the problem: when you start a loop and you don't have enough energy, you do the loop and you end up finishing the loop at a lower altitude than what you started. And you can pretty much figure out what happened there with Marcus's loop. He didn't have enough energy when he did that loop from takeoff. He didn't dive for it because he had just taken off. He did the loop, didn't have enough energy, and he finished at a lower altitude than where he started. And because he was starting from ground level, he hit the ground.
Oh, man.
So, and yeah, I was at the air show in Madras. I was also performing there as well when the accident happened, and that was the end of the air show.
Did they have it for the rest of the weekend, or was that it?
If I remember correctly, that was it.
Oh,
yeah, that was the rest of the air show. But yeah, it was very, yeah. It was you know, what do you say? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, I mean, Marcus got killed doing that maneuver. I mean, I can dissect it and I can talk about exactly what happened, what led up to it, you know, all this sort of stuff. You know, some people said it was a density altitude issue. Other people said it was a wind gust issue. I mean, these things are true. And to maybe elaborate a little bit more, so on the first day he made it, the maneuver. So the first day was a Friday show. It was the evening and it was cooler out. So Marcus, he did it. He did the loop and he made it on the first day. And what happened, I mean, but the thing is, when you watched the airplane, and I watched it too on the first day, I was like, man, that doesn't quite look right. Because he wasn't doing the loop and flying it back down to the ground. He was doing the loop and pulling to miss the ground. There's a big difference, right? Remember on the first way, I said you can loop and you can finish at a higher altitude, but then just fly it back down to the ground to make it look scary, but it's actually not scary. You actually have a lot of margin versus coming in with not enough energy, pulling to miss the ground on the bottom. You can tell the airplane digs through the air. It's at a high angle of attack to the air, and if you're pulling to miss, that's a big difference. Anyway, that's what happened day one. Day two, it was an afternoon show. It was hotter. So yes, density altitude played a part in Marcus's crash. Um, but it doesn't tell the whole story. It was just really. I don't want to sit here and just criticize, but it was just really really sad, and I was very new at the time, and even though I was new in the industry, I should have, and other people talked to him. I should have gone up to him and said, Marcus, that didn't look right. You know what I mean? You should be carrying more energy, and that is something that we do in the air show industry. Is we're all in this together. If we see another performer do something that isn't that just looks maybe a little bit dangerous, we need to go and talk to them, and even if it's going to make them angry, or even if whatever, we have to go talk to them and say, hey, we're worried about you. We don't like this sequence of maneuvers. We don't like the way this is leaving you with thin margins. We need to really look out for each other. And I know that there was other people at that air show that did go talk to Marcus, and they said, hey, we're worried about this maneuver that you're doing, and he chose to do it on the Saturday, on the day show. But yeah, so I hope that gives some clarity to, I guess, what caused Marcus's crash, and how we can prevent that in the future. We need to, we just need to make sure that the biggest takeaway from this is margins. We can't rely on a perfect density altitude calculation, or that there won't be a wind gust. We need to have big margins built into our airshow performances, so that when we make a mistake, when we make a miscalculation, those margins will save us. They'll make up the difference.
Yep.
So, and you can actually fly close to the ground with big margins. If you're low, have a lot of speed. Have big margins. If you don't have the altitude margin, have a different kind of a margin built into it. And it can actually be done relatively safely, but I don't want to, ramble on too much about that. But that was a very sad, unfortunate, terrible accident. And that's why Marcus is no longer with us.
Yep. Exactly. 100% saying that and advocating for yourself. If you see something that's wrong, you should, hey, stick up. That's what I did. I did that at my school,
That's
actually.
really good.
Above
Yeah.
all things, the fire alarm.
Yeah. No, I think that's good. I think we can take these lessons and we can apply them in our lives in various things. It doesn't have to be air shows. It could be the school. It could be, I don't know, your buddy not wearing a seatbelt. Just silly little things like that. And you're like, man, we're basically, we're basically, yeah, we're reducing the margin. Say, we're dramatically increasing the chance of getting hurt if you get into a crash or something. So it's amazing. We can go do these really quite dangerous things like wing walking and stuff. And we realize, okay, what we're doing is dangerous, so we're going to take this precaution and that precaution and that precaution. And then you get hurt, or you get seriously, or killed doing something really dumb, something small. Say, like a motorcycle or a bicycle accident, or who knows, just something where you slip in the bathtub. I always use that as kind of a funny joke. And then because we sometimes don't realize, that stuff can be dangerous too. And I don't even know where I'm going with this. All I'm saying is, I don't know. Just what you did, whatever you did, just look out for each other. That's all.
100%.
See something, say something.
Yep. And that's great advice. And what was the best aviation advice that you've ever received?
Oh boy. I I might have to think about that one. Haven't thought about that in a while. That might come to me, but you know what? Let me circle back to that one, because the best thing, I've received so much really good advice, and I'll think of something that would be hopefully helpful to your viewers.
Okay, got it. And what advice can you give me, aspiring aviators like myself who maybe want to pursue a career in aviation?
Sure, I'd love to. So it took me. So I didn't come from an aviation background. No one in my family flew. I wasn't helped out financially, to get the training. I just kind of had to kind of figure it out. And, we all kind of based on our life situation, you just kind of have to figure it out. And it doesn't always happen fast. For me, getting all my licenses and ratings, it took years because I worked at the same time. I would work and then I would blow the money on flying. I would work and then I would blow the money on flying. And I would try to do each rating over quite a short amount of time. So I would try to save up enough money to do my private license. And then I would do the private and try to do it as quickly as possible, because that way it keeps you from having to relearn. Say if you're only flying a couple times a month, you spend most of that lesson just relearning what you forgot. But if you can say fly every other day sort of thing and have enough money that you can fly every other day until you finish your private license, that's really the most efficient way to do it. So what I would do is I would work and I would save up enough money to do my private, and then I would work and I'd save up enough money to do my night rating, and then I'd work and I'd save up enough to do my multi-engine. I would do it like that, and it took me years. It probably took me 3 or 4 years to do everything, which
Wow.
was which is a bit of time, but that worked for me. And yeah, so just figure out what you have to do financially to kind of figure it out. But it is a good return on investment, even though it feels like it's so much money just going so quickly. Um, yeah, that would
Got
be
it.
my best. Yeah, just I don't know what their financial situation is, but if you can get a good job, you can make a sacrifice in the short term to just get her done. You know, um, then that would be great.
Got it. Thank you so much for the advice. That's really good advice too to everybody here watching, is always just sacrifice the things that you don't think are a big deal and you can get it done in a few years. So thank you for that advice, Stefan.
Yes, you're welcome. I hope that's helpful.
And then where can viewers go to learn more about you and your performances?
Third Strike Wing Walking is the name of the air show performance. So then we have a website. I think it's thirdstrikewingwalking.com. So they can learn about Carol Pilon, about myself, about the other wing walkers, about the show, and there's also a schedule on there. So it says where we're going to be that upcoming year.
Okay.
So and we really, I'm not doing this. I'm just doing this for fun. I really enjoy working with the team. I enjoy meeting people at air shows. So if people I have an opportunity to meet me or they see me, I'd really love for them to come over and say hi. And especially if they saw me on the TV show, I'd really enjoy talking to them, knowing that it had a positive impact on them, that they enjoyed watching it, that they followed the story, that maybe it helps to inspire them in their own aviation career. I'd love to hear that. So, and I really appreciate that you had me on the show. So thank you very much.
Hey, my pleasure. And if anybody else, oh wait, somebody says, hey, Lethbridge is not doing air shows anymore.
Well, I did the Lethbridge Air Show last year. Was it last year? Yeah, it was last year. Did the Lethbridge Air Show. So they didn't do an air show for, must have been, I think I did their air show like 8 years ago. So then they had a time span of, like several years there where they didn't do one. But I'm pretty sure they're going to be planning another one here in the next year or two.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mhm.
That's good. So, yeah, if anybody else doesn't have any questions, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thank you so much, Stefan, for coming on and chatting, sir. I really appreciate your time. And don't worry about the last time. I understand you're busy and stuff like that.
Sure. All right. Awesome. Thank you, Braden. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Hey, awesome. Thank you so much. My pleasure chatting with you.
You're welcome.
And can't wait to see you at air shows either this year or next year. Who knows?
Absolutely. Yeah. Come and say hi or send me a message over Instagram if we're going to be at the same air show. And then I'll make a point that we can actually meet in person.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Right on.
Bye, Stefan.
See you,
Bye-bye,
Braden.
sir.